Well, let me move on to Steve Sherrill for his what do you want to talk about? And I think tonight he's got a subject that, frankly, he's talking about because some modelers sent me emails and said they wanted to hear it. So, Steve, welcome.
Thank you. Well, we're going to start tonight talking about battery power, dead rail. I'm going to introduce you to an inexpensive way of getting introduced to battery power. First up, I think we're going to show a video that was made 9 years ago. It was made on my railroad by Joey Ricard from Trackside Scenery, and which we talk about battery dead rail. And he had asked some questions, and we show some things that I did for some models that he had made. So, Phil, if you want to show that.
Steve, what do we have here?
We're looking at conversion of this layout from DCC to battery-powered radio control with a Dell Tang RC system, which is 2.4 gigabytes. It's extremely small. The parts are in the tender of this porter. I just installed for Joey Ricard. It gives you full control. It does not support sound at this time. If you look at the controllers for this, here's the size of it. It's just a little bit bigger or smaller than a pack of cigarettes. If you compare this to a standard control, you can see the size difference. We have the speed control on these is absolutely wonderful. We can make these locomotives creep and we don't have to worry about dirty track. It will almost pull itself on the ground if it's derailed.
That definitely is a big consideration that a lot of people have, is the condition of their track and the electrical connections. I myself have to worry about that at train shows with the spruce coal and timber layout, where there's a lot of dust that comes in overnight. The next day you come in, the layout's dirty.
For the locomotive,
that's small.
That's very small. It's less than an inch by a half of an inch, and it will run this locomotive for almost 2 hours of continuous running. Installation for this particular system only takes about 30 minutes. It depends on the access to the electrical wires which go to the motor. It's 2 wires to the motor and 2 wires to the batteries, and that's it.
Now, how do we charge this locomotive up when it runs out of gas here, so to speak?
Well, what I've done in the installations that I do, I put a charging port in the back, which we put the charging lines in. This is just a simulated right here.
Gotcha. So in theory, you could have a locomotive shop and have a wire that comes out somewhere that pulls out, and you could charge your locomotive up there while you're running around the layout with the other locomotives. Is that right?
Correct. You can leave it on the track, or you can take it off the track. Now, because you're equipped with reed switches, which are activated by batteries, if you look down, you'll see a green light come on. Green light came on. If you can see that flashing.
See that.
Okay. Once that becomes solid and we bind with the controller, it is now ready to run. When it comes time to turn it off, we just have a button on the transmitter and we just turn it off.
Seems pretty easy. How easy is the installation for someone putting in the charging port, and how much room did you have in this particular tender here? And the other question I want to ask for everybody is, if you don't have a tender like this, now I built this tender to house a speaker when I had the DCC unit in there, but how would you be able to do it in a standard porter? I think that's probably, a lot of people would want to know that.
Well, I don't have a standard porter, but I do have a Davenport. This Davenport has the battery in the cab, the charging port in the back, as you can see right here. It has the receiver, and I've used a step up, which steps the current up from 3.7 volts, which is what this battery has, to 12 volts. And so that means it will run and pull a lot more. This is one of the old AHM 1970s Plymouth diesels that I have converted. They never were very good runners. They, you know, once the wheels got dirty in the 70s, people kind of got rid of them. This particular one has the charging port under a light.
Interesting.
So when you finish charging, you can put the light in, and nobody even knows it's there.
Now, the next question somebody might have is, what about lighting? What about headlights and backup lights and things like that? What's the current status on being able to use that?
Well, everything you add to the battery usage will decrease the amount of time that you can operate your locomotive. You can put lights on it. You can put directional lights. I'm not a big light proponent. I don't think they're of any value. If you use yellow lenses that are available, you can simulate lights on in the daytime, so you don't need it.
I can certainly see someone with modern diesels and things like that want to have lights, and that would be a consideration.
Certainly do that.
But definitely for people of the steam era, and especially what we're doing here with ON30 and the smaller early 1900s type stuff, it probably doesn't matter that there is a headlight. And to be honest with you, on my railroad, at this point, it doesn't,
Right.
no consideration.
Right. But you can do it. There are a lot of receivers that Deltang makes, which will allow you more and more servos, which gives you more and more opportunity to add different lights.
Gotcha. Go ahead.
These are the components that go into the Deltang system for the installation. You have the receiver, you have the battery, or batteries, depending on how much current you want to run through, and the transmitter. This is a transmitter that's already built, available at Deltang. You would just put a 9-volt battery in it to activate it. This locomotive has 7.4 volts, where we have linked up two 3.7 volt batteries put together.
So there's two batteries in that one.
There's two batteries in that one. This one has one 3.7 volt battery. It's larger in size, has more milliamps, which allows you to operate longer. Because of the size, we went with these two, which will give you a little over 2 hours, and this is probably about the same, a little over 2 hours.
It just won't be able to pull more.
We just won't pull more, yeah. If you look at an installation here, you can see how these batteries have been linked together and painted so they're not visible through the windows. Here's the receiver on top, the battery's underneath, and then the motor is underneath that, and you can wire right in. I have double back tape so it doesn't move around when I take the cab on and off.
Now, is there anybody in the U.S. that does these installations yet? Is there any kits that are available, or is this all, at this point, pieced together? Because I know you're a proponent of the Dead Rail Society, and I know you get on some of the message boards and the Yahoo groups and talk about it, but what can the average person that wants to go to battery power and radio control, what do they need to do?
Well, you get a lot of help on the forum groups, Free Rails,
Railroad Line and
Rail Line Forum. They have some. The Dead Rail Society is out there. If you Google Dead Rail Society, you can contact them. They'll be able to help. I believe there's an article in the ON30 annual this year with the Dead Rail Society did a article on installation of sound with their radio control battery powered. I believe there's 4 companies that are doing battery powered at this point. And this is only the one Deltang that I'm talking about today that I prefer. I've seen the others, they all work, you know, so you just have to make your choice. This is probably the least expensive way to go. Um, there are lots of components that you can put together. If you have, depending on how much amps, how many amps you're going to need, whether you want to build the units yourself or whether you want to get them ready to run. There's lots of opportunities here. Okay, so what you saw there was kind of an introduction 10 years ago now. You have to remember there's been a lot of new stuff out there. We have Blue Nami now, which supports battery and dead rail. We have several others that I'm not really familiar with at this time. But what I'm going to introduce you to is the most economical way of getting into dead rail. I'm going to show you now some of the components, I think.
You had them a minute ago.
I did?
Yes, right there. Oh, you got rid of them again.
Okay, because I don't see them.
Do what you just did a minute ago. There.
Gotcha. Okay, so you can see the different batteries. Here's a battery that's 7.4, and it will need to be balanced. And later on, we're going to show the chargers and what balancing does.
Pat, can you help Steve get his camera so that that's all we're seeing is just what he's showing?
That's it.
That's all you want to see right now.
That's all you want to see.
Yeah.
Because what I'm seeing is 9 different pictures.
9.
Seven different people on the Zoom plus the battery shot. That's what I'm seeing right now on my screen.
There. Can you see that?
It's one of nine small, very small pictures.
There you are. Okay. So here's the very small one, about 80 milliamps. Now that probably wouldn't run but 30 minutes. You can see the side of it next to a quarter. Here is a race car receiver. Here is a Deltang receiver. You can see the size of them next to a penny. But what we're going to do for our presentation is we're going to take a race car, RC race car, and we're going to put that into a diesel locomotive, and we're going to make it work. And I'll show you how to do it. And then it comes with this type of control, which is a standard pistol grip type thing. And then Bob Gelmacher is going to go over how to convert the insides of that into and make a more familiar controller. So we also have another kind of dead rail. This is actually was made by MRC. They've sold this part of the company to another company now, which now makes it. It's available. And this one actually has sound in it and had its own controller. And you can fine tune this particular one on your DCC if you have a DCC system. It's not as good as, say, it's the Blue Namis that are out now by Soundtracks or some of the other fancy sound units. It is very inexpensive though, and if you're going to consider attempting to try to get into dead rail, these are the ways to go inexpensively. So if you decide you don't want to be in dead rail, you haven't spent a lot of money.
How much money are we talking about?
$15 for that.
It's about as cheap as it gets.
Now, I got those special. They're now $25, okay?
Mhm.
This is, it's got a $71 on it. I got this from Klimojevich at anyway, Klimojevich, if you look him up in the phone book, he's in Pennsylvania. Warrior Run Locomotive Works. He has these, and he would be, I don't know what the price is up there, but this one, if you're working with locomotives that have are DCC ready, this has an 8-pin plug. You literally plug this in and you remove the 2 wires that go to the track and you hook them to a battery and you're ready to go. You will need 2 AAAs, I think, to go in here. But that is about as easy as it gets for putting it in. Otherwise, you have to hardwire it in. It's not that difficult, but certainly it's got very adequate sound. It's got, I forget how, 6 or 7 whistles, 6 or 7 bells. You can access all these things. You hit a couple of those buttons and it says program on it, and you program it to what you want. And when you're done, you hit the buttons again and you program off, and it will retain whatever settings you've made on it. It's not bad at all. The speaker can be replaced with a cube or some other speaker if you like, if that's too big. But that's a complete sound system.
Can you send me an email or something, Steve, with how I contact that person?
Sure,
Thank you.
I can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're going to be talking about is a lot of different, the terminology is going to be different. And so we're going to be going over some of that. And you're going to hear things like volts, milliamps, gigahertz. I know in that film, in the video, it said gigabytes, but you know, that was me. Transmitters, electronic speed controls, receivers, reed switches. We're going to learn to bind. We're going to review some chargers. We're going to explain step-ups. And then we're going to go over some basic components that we're going to need. There's a train show this weekend, and I'm going to go and look for a very inexpensive HO diesel that we can convert using the RC car during one of our sessions. And so I'll be looking for that this week at the train show in Martinsburg at the Roundhouse. If you've never been to that, it's a pretty good train show, and it's in a very nice location. I think the Roundhouse was built in 1876 or something like that. Very nice, very nice. The CSX main line runs right beside it, and there'll be lots of trains. So it's a good place to go. $6, you get in. So are there any?
I'm looking forward to that, Steve. I think this is exactly what the people that sent me the email, it's exactly what they want to see.
Well, we're going to do it's going to be very basic. Bob Gelmacher is going to help me out a lot on this. He's an expert on the soldering iron. He's also has made the new version of the controllers, which makes them much easier. You know, we're just not too familiar with the use of the pistol grips for binding and control. But if you learn how to do these, it's just a much more familiar operation. And most of the guts in this come from that controller right there. There's a few things we have to get, but everything is readily available. And I'm going to go over where to get some of this stuff. Like eBay, manufacturers, electronic suppliers, hobby shops have some of this stuff. Most hobby shops do not know about dead rail. They don't have enough call for it, and so they're just not that familiar yet. But this new Blue NAMI is going to put them in a situation where they're going to have to learn, because I believe that this is a great introduction to someone who wants to do using DCC they already have, and putting dead rail in there also, because you can do DCC, dead rail. I think even DC they'll do. I'm not sure on that, but it's a very good system, and it's a Cadillac version. But there's a lot of stuff on YouTube right now concerning the products that are available, soundtracks and all. And I think we're hoping to get the soundtracks, George, from him, to give us a little talk on it. And I don't know if Phil can get that or not. He's mentioned it.
It's an interesting question. Does anybody have DC on their layout still? Is anybody just a DC person?
Here he is.
Gary, few. Greg, not very many. So, one of the things that, is so interesting about dead rail is the idea that, a lot of people, the reason they haven't gone to DCC is, if you've got 30 or 40 locomotives, the cost of going to DCC, there's two costs. One is you have to do the wiring to rewire your system. And that's kind of about a $500 to $1,000 base cost to get into, depending on what you buy. By the time you buy some cabs, and I understand you can buy cheaper if you use phones and that kind of thing. But if you buy an NCE system or an MRC system or a Digitrax, and 2 or 3 cabs for people to a couple of cabs to operate, you're into it for a chunk. And then you have to put decoders in your locomotives because you're kind of running one or the other. If you've got a 2-cab DC system, if you have a dead rail, and it doesn't really matter how it's built, whether it's kind of the technology Steve's talked about here, some of the dead rail technologies, or Blue NAMI with a battery. The beauty of it is if you've got one of the charge circuits that lets you charge it off the tracks, it's charging while it's running around on the 12-volt tracks, but it's only getting power from the tracks. And then it's doing all the rest of the activity, wireless. And the nice thing about the Blue NAMI is, and this is why I think it'd be interesting to have George come in and talk to us, is, you can take 2 or 3 engines on take your 2, 3, 4 most popular engines, put Blue NAMI and sound in them. By the time you get done and pay somebody to do it, it'll be $250 an engine. But now you can still run all your DC powered engines just like you always did in a block, but you can run the battery powered engines in the same blocks or anywhere on the layout. And so it's a really pretty interesting thought process about, how do you not go through the process of rewiring your layout, but still have that capability when people come in, there are, 3 or 4 engines that have sound and can be operated independently on the layout. And, if you want to operate, it lets you actually do most of the operations that way, where you can still run, some mainline trains with DC as well. So I think it's just some really interesting options. I think it's great for Steve to talk about it.
Well,
Steve, I really appreciate you taking this on, and I really do. I know you're a little hesitant, but I really do appreciate you taking this on. And I think tonight is a great introduction. Let's face it, to get the basic hookups that you need and a controller for $15, that's kind of hard to beat.
well, now remember, this is as basic as you get. I mean, it'll go forwards and reverse. You will have some speed control, but it's not a Blue NAMI. Okay, it is what it is. It's much better than cleaning track. I can assure you of that.
Well,
And
as a person who still operates with DC, what you're talking about is basically what I have right now.
yeah, yeah. And the system, the way I use it is I have a battery car, and I can use the battery car and hook up to any engine I want, so I don't have to charge. You know, I charge the battery cars up and then just put a different battery car on behind it and connect it in. It gives a lot more flexibility, and it's just easier to deal with as far as runtime. But I know that when I operate my layout, I have like a 3-hour operation, and it will run. Any one of these engines will run for 3 hours on the layout. So, you know, that's one of the questions people always want to know: how long will it run? How much does it cost? You know, where do I get this stuff? You know, I've talked to lots and lots of people, and they're the basic questions. You know, it's almost like, what coupler do I use? You know, and you have to kind of lead people and show them exactly. They want to see exactly what it looks like when it's completed, and you say, well, here, take a throttle and see how it runs, and they, oh, I don't need to do that. So they're a little hesitant. I don't know whether they think it's going to electrocute them or something, but they don't. They just don't seem to want to run it. But it's very, very simple. Very, very simple. And Bob Gelmacher's made these controllers for me that, you know, it makes it so familiar with what we're using as model railroaders, you know. And then the other one with the touchpad, it's a little bit different, but everything that we have in our household has a touchpad, but it's just unfamiliar for model railroaders. So they're a little hesitant on that, but once they get that system down, they say, oh, that's great. So it's familiarization, you know, and battery guys, we love to talk to the non-battery people, you know. I mean, I've got my micro layouts I can take anywhere. I don't, you know, all I need is an outlet somewhere in the building if I have to charge a battery. And it makes it so much easier. I could be in the middle of the floor, or I can be next to a wall with a charger, with an electric outlet. And when we get into the chargers, we're going to learn a lot about charging the batteries. Again, different chargers, different places you buy them. You know, I'll be making some recommendations, I hope. And it's just going to be fun. We're just going to have some fun with this, you know, because I'll never get under a layout again, a wire. I can tell you that. That day is gone for me. And as an early DCC user, when it first came out, I had it. And what a nightmare. I'm not computer oriented. And I had a nightmare trying to figure out how to get that stuff to run. CVs, all that, the X's and O's and all, didn't mean a thing to me. So when battery came along, I was right there. But, you know, I've been doing battery probably since the middle 80s, from G scale on down. I do believe that you can do, I think Klimajevich has it in HON3. And I think you can get it down to N. You know, it's just a matter of how much power it's going to take. I'd have to look at the motors and see how much they draw. But most of them would draw 3.7 volts, you know, and you can step up the voltage. And then that's done real easy. And again, inexpensively. And eBay, we can get the stuff really cheap. You can buy them 10 at a time. You will have to have some parts, meaning connectors, step ups if you want to go that way, wire, extra wire, soldering gun. So we're gonna have to learn some new skills maybe. And so, again, we're gonna do this. And so I'll be looking for a locomotive this weekend. I'm not gonna spend more than $10 for it either. I'm hoping the guy tells me it doesn't run, because that's when they're really, you know. So
Well, I'm looking forward to this. I really appreciate you taking the time to do it, Steve.
well, no problem at all. No problem at all.